Welcome, everyone. My name is Rudy Rodriguez. My other name is Coach Rudy, and I'm pleased to meet you here. And I want to thank Renify and Rick for inviting me to do this presentation tonight. I've been looking very forward to doing this. So I apologize for the glare on my glasses, but I can't change the lighting, so we'll just go with it, okay? Now, a little bit about myself, to introduce myself, unless, Rick, you want to say something?
Well, I was thinking about that. That's why I was reading through all your things, but I'm sure you could introduce yourself a lot better than I could. And yeah.
Well, unless there's something you want to say, right? So I want to mention that I moved to North Carolina in 1981 and began working for a clinic where we were evaluating children, and that was the first time I had heard and learned about ADHD. So that's where I got my feet wet, and then that was 81, and then I started my practice, my therapy practice in 83, excuse me. And then in 1991, we realized there was an adult version of ADHD. And so I was then diagnosed with adult ADHD in 1993. So since then, I've just been diving into the world of ADHD. I specialize in adults with ADHD coaching. I provide also groups and seminars and webinars, and have a book in progress, and so I really stay busy with that. So tonight's program, we're going to talk about the mystery of ADHD and motivation. So I have a question for some of you before we start. And let's use the chat. If the chat is available, I don't know. Let's use it only for responding back, because what I've noticed, I just came off an ADHD international conference this last week, and everybody uses the chat, but who's paying attention to the presentation? So let's just use the chat for some feedback. How many of you have trouble getting started with things that you want to do? Whether it's something that you choose to do, whether it's something possibly that you need to do, that you've been told to do. I'm assuming most of you have trouble with that. So anyone want to just chat in and say yes or no? Or okay, good. We've got lots of yeses. Yeah, it's kind of a phenomenon that occurs pretty naturally with those of us with ADHD. So the program tonight is going to delve into that. So why don't we go ahead and get started? Looks like we're ready. Okay, and let me get rid of this. Get rid of the floating controls. There we go. Okay, and then we'll do this. Oops. Okay, so the mystery of ADHD and motivation. Now, there are several things that may cause us to be delayed, to have us procrastinate, and just in generally not get started. So let's look at ADHD first of all. We know that our core symptoms are inattention, distractibility. Well, if that's not enough, that certainly would keep us away from doing what we need to do. And then maybe some impulsivity to think about doing something else, or maybe reading some text or something. So those three core symptoms are really have potential in keeping us back and keeping us from inaction or action. And then, of course, there's the executive functions. So there's planning, organization, prioritization. All of those are critical because we have deficits in every one of these areas. So if we are not planning, if we have not organized well, we're probably not going to do very well in getting started. So Dr. Brown, Thomas Brown, has put this little graphic together, and you see all the different parts of the executive function. So it means effort. We've got to put effort and then regulate that effort. We have to maintain and sustain some focus, and then that activation, pulling the trigger. So all of those are part of executive function. But what I'm here tonight to talk about something else. We're going to talk about emotions and thoughts. So if you think about a project or task, it seems pretty simple. There's three simple steps. You just get started. And then, of course, you continue. And then at the end, you finish and it's done. Simple enough, right? But for those of us with ADHD, it's a little bit different. So let's break it down. The first step would be getting started. So I guess we want to assume that there's interest and novelty and some intention to do things. Let me put my phone on airplane. There we go. And rewards, if there's rewards. And so maybe in their motivation. So we have what it takes to get started. Let's assume that. So now to continue, we would benefit from some sustained interest and engagement, some novelty, some effort, energy, and some motivation. So the next thing is it would be simple. We just finish. And when we finish, there's satisfaction, success, joy, reduced stress, anxiety. That would be the ideal, right? But let's take a look at what really happens. The assumptions: interest, intention, novelty, motivation. But then in addition to that, there's those I need to, or I must, I should. And urgency sometimes works for us. Deadlines can work for us and sometimes against us. But we have this to start with. Next, we're ready to get started. So we've got a plan, preparation, all those things. So we're ready to start, right? No, Houston, we've got a problem. Because what happens is that we tend to pre-attach thoughts and emotions to the task that we're trying to do. So the thoughts may be, oh, this is going to be difficult. Oh, it's boring. I don't really understand what to do. What if I fail again? Oh, the pressure, I just can't take it. The stress, anxiety, overwhelm. So all of these kinds of thoughts, feelings, and emotions are likely to have us not take action. So instead, here is the goal to start. So instead of moving forward that task, we have these negative thoughts and emotions. Again, it's going to be difficult. It's not interesting, boring. It's going to be failure, all these things. So what happens is that we procrastinate or delay. Or we may also feel avoidance, resistance. Anybody feel resistance? You just don't want to do that. I like to say that sometimes we have a teenager within us who is defiant. I am not going to do this. And that little person comes out from now and then. And then, of course, the third one and most interesting is procrastivity. You know about procrastivity? This is when we're procrastinating by doing an activity that we're not intending to do, but maybe it's more interesting and it looks like we're at least busy. Procrastivity. So we are experts and maybe pros at procrastivity. So here's where the problems are. These negative thoughts and emotions, they block us from actually pulling the trigger and getting started. I hope you all can relate to this. So the big takeaway here is that it may not just be the lack of motivation that prevents us from taking action. In fact, it's, as we say in the ADHD world, it's not just knowing what to do. We just don't do what we know we need to do. And that's a common experience for people with ADHD. We know it, we don't do it for various reasons that we've talked about. So, Houston, what can I do? How can I break this cycle down so that we can proceed and create some action? So let's look at two possibilities. One, let's look at the cognitive thoughts, the perceptions that we have. And then we'll take a look at the emotions that can sometimes back us up. So let's start with cognitive. The first thing to do is to recognize your language. Be attentive to those inner thoughts, the narrative that you have, the kind of guides, the inner thoughts that guide you, like, oh, it's going to be bad or good. How about I should, or I have to, I must. All of these things can limit us from taking action. Or the feeling, I just fail again. Why do it? And, of course, perfection, many ADHD people, we won't get started unless we know it will be perfect. So we delay, we procrastinate. Oh, maybe I probably won't understand it anyway if I get started, so I'm just not going to do it. Or if it's going to be difficult. So it's the internal language that comes up. So some of you may put on the chat possibly, what are some of the thoughts, the inner thoughts that come up for you that prevent you from taking any action or language? And Rick, if you can moderate that and just shout a couple of those out if they share them.
Sure,
What are some of the thoughts that come up for you that prevents you.
And while they're doing that, I'll just mention one of the things I actually did put in the chat. Motivation is seldom my problem. I know I'm motivated, but there's like a glass wall in the way. And I think that's a common experience.
There you go. And that's what we're talking about, the glass wall. Good. Thank you.
Fear of failure, Lisa put in.
Yep.
Overwhelm, indecision. Yep.
Right. All of those kinds of thoughts, that inner language, that inner voice will either promote us or prevent us. So that's one cognitive intervention, to look at the language that you have inside. Now, so let's look at benefit or cost benefit analysis. Now, in my world, when I coach people, we're looking at the payoff and the cost. So we have to understand that there's a payoff for everything we do and don't do. So understand that there's a payoff for procrastination. It works, right? If I don't do it, maybe someone else will do it. Or if I don't do it, then I get to do what I really want to do. And a number of other payoffs there for procrastination. So first of all, we want to look at what's the payoff. And I think it's important to understand that. What is the payoff? The second one is what's going to be the cost. Now, here's the problem. We tend to examine the cost in the moment only. And the cost of the moment is never significant. So we're going to go for the payoff right away. We blow off any cost. It's not important. I'll do it tomorrow. Oh, that's okay. It'll work out. Whatever those magical thinking thoughts that we have, we blow off the cost. So that doesn't work. So the real questions that we need to ask are, what's the payoff, number one? And secondly, what's the cumulative cost? So what has been the cumulative cost of this lack of taking action for yourself over the years, over the weeks and months, maybe taxes, for instance? What is currently happening in your life that you've been putting off that has cumulative cost? And what's life going to look like in 5 years, 10 years or more if you do not learn to take this on? So it's a cumulative cost. And if you look at the cost has to be great for us, or we're just going to blow it off again. So look at the cumulative cost, the major cost that or the worst cost maybe that you can consider.
So Rudy,
Yes.
Deborah has something interesting in the chat there.
Sure.
Which I might rephrase just a little bit, but I don't have to take responsibility or blame for a mistake if I don't do it. And I know for myself, I kind of feel the opposite. I feel if I don't do it, there's nobody else to blame but me. So where would you put that? Because I do think that's a pretty common thought, is the fear of failure, right? If I don't try, then no one's going to see that I failed, kind of thing.
Right. Part of the nature of ADHD is we have some shame. We have some several emotions that come up with that, and we don't want to feel that, and we don't want other people to see that. We don't want them to see that we may show up like a failure. Of course, we're not, but we have those fears that may happen. So that's a pretty common experience. We're going to avoid anything that we believe is going to cause pain or discomfort. We're just not going to do that. Now, on the other hand, if you look at the cumulative cost of not taking action in that case, then what is that? What would that look like? That's why I would answer that in that way. Did that address the question?
Maybe, Deborah, you can type up a follow-up in there if you want to. Michael is also mentioning rejection sensitivity, dysphoria. So
exactly,
does that fall in there somewhere? So I know myself, I've kind of gotten it over it. It's taken me the better part of 70 years, but I lots of times I wouldn't try something because I was afraid of what someone else would say about that. I mean, foreign language is a perfect example. All of my kids are bilingual. I was really afraid to practice because I didn't want to embarrass myself. And
right, exactly. Yeah, you can see me, I'm a Latino. I don't speak Spanish, and that has been embarrassing in past years. I've got over it, but yeah, I was afraid to speak up in that way. Mm-hmm. So yes, rejection sensitive dysphoria, RSD, that is a major player here. And for women with ADHD, a great deal of shame, wanting to hide out. We want to look good. We want to appear quote unquote normal, whatever the hell that is. But we don't want to look different. And so if we risk, there's that chance or possibility that we're going to stand out. And we don't want to stand out, at least in that negative way. So that often prevents us from taking those risks. And then in that case, as I'll talk about later, we live small. We live a small life because it's a comfort zone, but we don't get to really experience the fullness of life. Okay, well, let's move on. So another cognitive intervention that this is something I came up with, is what I call red zones. So let's take football. Now, my understanding is, first of all, we've got a player, right? And he's got possession and he's going downfield towards the goal. So when you're doing that, the last thing you want to do is throw the ball away, to fumble, or do anything like that sort. So there's what they refer to as the red zone, the last 20 yards. You want to be very careful. And so red zones occur in our life frequently, but usually we wander into that or venture into that without realizing it. And so there could be a number of red zones. For instance, let's say that you have a tendency to interrupt people. Let's go with that one. So you know, in certain situations with certain people, you're really prone to interrupt. That would be a red zone. So you know that going into that situation, you want to be clear that there is that danger there. Or maybe you walk into shopping somewhere and there's a real risk that you're going to overspend. Well, that's a red zone. So going into that shopping center or something, you want to be mindful. You want to be careful about what you do. So there's two ways of intervention. We want to prevent that from happening by knowing in advance that you're stepping into a risk of zone or a high risk zone. And then secondly, plan B would be, if you find yourself in the middle of it, how can you get out of it? And I usually look and develop mindfulness for that. We'll come back to that another time. But the idea of red zones is to identify what are those red zones, the things that happen to you over and over again, and define them as that, and list what your red zones are, because they're happening all the time. So what happens is, what will experience anxiety. These are some of the things that may come up. Overwhelm, from landing in the red zone. Maybe procrastination, because we haven't looked at that and prepared in advance. If we knew this was likely to cause procrastination, we might have taken some action beforehand. And then there's stress, and maybe it's just boring. So what do we do about those things? So in this one, know what your red zones are and plan for that in advance. So have some interventions that are known when you know you're going to have difficulty, maybe with planning, maybe with research or something of that sort, or maybe opening your computer. If you're going to do research on the computer, that's a red zone for many of us, because there's always the danger of going all around the world on the internet. So we want to be mindful how you do that. Maybe set up some timers or other things, some awareness symbols that can help you become aware of what you're doing. Okay, so those are three interventions that have to do cognitively. We want to think about that. We want to plan that. The other area is going to be about reframing your perception and your emotion. Now, this is really critical, because we want to understand that it's not so much what you're doing when we're maybe sitting down to do a project or something. It's not so much what you're doing, like cleaning up. It's about how you feel about what you're doing. So if you're going to clean up the kitchen, I was coaching someone this morning, clean up the kitchen, and it's just a big mess. Well, if your feeling is, oh gosh, this is overwhelming, I can't do this, take a look at how you feel about what you're doing, because we want to reframe thoughts and emotions so that you want to do what you're doing. You get that? Anybody comment on that? What would happen? What would be possible for you if there was something, say a kitchen full of dishes or something else, and it just doesn't feel right? But if you could reframe that in some way in your own words, so you want to do that, what would be possible then? Any comments on that?
I do, while they're typing.
Sure.
That was one of the biggest things I think that made a difference for me, is to reframe all the I have to's. I mean, for
Yes.
example, I don't have to go to work. I could live under a bridge if I wanted to. I don't have to go to work. I want to go to work so I don't have to live under a bridge. So I reframe things. It's a little bit of a mind game, but when I turn it into something I want to do because I can see the benefits, it's much easier, because I get very oppositional when anybody tells me what to do, especially myself. So I think a lot of us are like that.
Yeah,
so if
right.
I'm telling myself to do something, it's really hard. But when I'm reframing it as something I actually want to do, then it's so much easier.
Yeah. If you have a non-ADD partner and they're telling you what to do,
Oh, yeah.
what's that going to feel like? But how can you reframe that into, I really love my partner. And one way I can show her the love is I want to do this. It can be simple sometimes, but it's very important. Any other comments there, Rick?
Yeah, see, it looks like Michael put something about spending an hour cleaning the house. And I'm not sure, but it sounds like you're putting it off till tomorrow is maybe a different situation than he's in today. I'm not quite sure what you meant there, Michael. You might want to redo that. And actually, if you guys could make your comments to everybody rather than just hosts and panelists, then other people can comment on those same questions and such. It's pretty good.
Good thought. Good thought.
Yeah, preventing bugs in the house. Yeah, I do think there's a lot of, we severely discount the future, as you mentioned earlier.
Oh,
And if
absolutely.
we can get in touch with the cost of something in the future and realize a small thing now could prevent a big issue later.
Absolutely. You kick that can down the road, it's going to end up somewhere and it's not pretty. So, Dr. Hollowell, he says, ADHD people, we've got 2 times, now and not now.
Right.
Well, it's hard to plan for the future when you're living and spending in the now. Right. How many people who are ADHD end up without retirement funds?
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go to a little exercise then. Get a practice exercise. So first of all, bring awareness to your thoughts and feelings, those unrealistic timelines that lead to decreased energy, lack of attention, all those things. We want to bring mindfulness into this. It plays a big role. And begin to focus on the pleasure of completing the focus. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm going to ask you to have a pen or pencil and paper, and then I'm going to ask you to close your eyes in a moment. Okay? Well, let's start here. One thing we frequently greet the task with resistance. It's like that teenager I spoke about. Before we even begin, we seem to already know how it's going to turn out. We already know the outcome. And so it's not very inviting for us to do that. So I want you to list on some paper 2 preconceived thoughts, perceptions, limiting beliefs that you may have, or emotions and feelings that are preventing you from taking action on something right now, today, this week. Okay, so take a few minutes to do that, or just a moment. And if somebody wants to share some of that in the chat, 2 preconceived thoughts, perceptions, limiting beliefs, or emotions and feelings that are preventing you from taking action now in the world, in your life. Okay, let's move ahead. Once you've done that, write the words that describe those thoughts and feelings that come to you. So when you have the thought, then what are that language, that inner language that comes up? Like, I'm going to fail, or those kinds of things. What are the thoughts, the feelings, the perceptions that come up? So give some single words to that preconceived thought and idea.
So, Rudy, I don't want to disrupt your flow here, but Stephanie has a question I'm going to allow to talk, and then we'll go ahead, Stephanie. Are you there?
Yeah. Okay, I got in a little bit late and I'm kind of confused a little bit. You said say one word. You kind of lost me a little bit.
Yeah, I guess my directions may not be clear, but write a couple of thoughts, perceptions, and then when you have that, what comes up in your head? What's the thought or feeling that may prevent you from doing anything? So just a couple of words or maybe phrases that come up, I guess I should say. Okay. So when you get clear of that, and don't make this too difficult, be easy on yourself. A couple of thoughts, perceptions, limiting beliefs, emotions, or feelings that come up frequently that in your life right now are stopping you from taking action. Maybe calling someone, letting them know how you feel about something, or maybe filing an application or something. Okay. So now what I want you to do is look at those things, and I'm going to ask you to close your eyes now. I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. And I have to stop sharing for a moment. And what I want you to do is think about the feeling. When you have this happening inside, the thought, emotion, the feeling, I want you to begin to feel that, whatever that is. Just allow it to ramp up a little bit. If it's on a level 2, try to take it up to a level 6 or something. Nothing that is you can't handle in the moment, but I want you to feel the fullness of that thought, the emotion, the limiting belief. And then see what's coming up for you there. See if there's something else, another thought underneath that, or maybe another emotion, and maybe it just piles on. Okay. Now, what I want you to do is let's pull back from that. I'm going to ask you to look at that thought or emotion, like, for instance, failure, or I have to, or something of that sort. I want you to look at that and see if you can reframe it. So just practice reframing something that seems negative into something that creates possibility. It doesn't have to be positive, but something that can create possibility for yourself. So it feels possible to do. Okay. Now sit with that one. And then when it's possible, feel that emotion and blow that up. And now what's the inner language that's coming up? What's the narrative that you're beginning to tell yourself? Okay, anybody want to comment on that?
I don't see anything in the chat here, but a couple of people I think don't quite understand what the assignment was. I'm not exactly positive I get it either, but when I went through that process using something that I need to get done, my realization was it's really not that bad, right? I just have to sit down and do it.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was where it led me to. But yeah, a couple of people are asking if you could maybe just real briefly just recap the assignment in a way, because I think you lost us.
Yeah, I think well, that's good. I'm glad people are paying attention. The directions as I read them now are not very clear. So the idea is think about something that you have to do, like cleaning up the kitchen or paying some bills, calling someone that's difficult to talk to. And then get in tune with the thoughts, the perception, limiting beliefs, emotions, or feelings that you associate with that. The kind of negative things, the awful things, the things that, oh, I don't want to do, that prevents you. Just take a look at that and feel that as strongly as you can. And then as you do that, see if something else comes up, another thought, a compounding thought or feeling. And these are the kind of things that we deal with day to day. And now, secondly, I'd like you to reframe whatever that thought or emotion is into something that could be positive, or think of it as something that could be possible. There's a possibility now. Well, be curious. Well, maybe I can do this. I don't know what's going to happen. And then blow that feeling up and see what comes up now. And hopefully that will help to clarify. The point is reframing And if you could put a positive spin, what's possible now? Okay, let me move on and we can come back to that. We'll have time for question and answers at the end. So what we want to do now is, here's some additional tips. When we're stuck and can't get going, if it's not in writing, it doesn't exist. That's what I tell my clients. A plan needs to be written. There's the muscular thing that happens, but also the visual helps to really make it clear for us what we need to do. So often brain dump, our working memory is flooded. We've got too many things up there. We can't work with it. We can't manipulate it. So do a brain dump, get it out on paper, and then see if you can make sense of it. Now, if you are stuck and can't get going with something, there's a likelihood that what you're trying to take on is too big. So chunk it down. Chunk it down. Keep chunking it down. And if you find yourself stuck again, chunk it down some more. Just keep chunking it down. So you get to a point where, I can do this in 15 minutes. Yeah, I can do this. Once you get started, then it's easier to keep rolling. For those of us with ADHD, one of the major problems is simply getting started. Now, keeping that momentum going is a different issue, but just getting started is so difficult. So find something interesting in the mundane. When we say that's boring. It's maybe chit chat or something of that. Find something interesting, even in the mundane. So you're creating a new possibility, a new window that may open up some new opportunity. Open up to the possibility. This is one of my big ones with my clients. What would be possible if? So we want to look outside the lens that you're currently looking at, and look at something different, a new possibility. What would be possible then? And the last one, another favorite of mine, is be curious. Comes with an old Buddhist story I love. And basically, hey, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know. We tend to think we know what's going to happen, and we universalize always, never, always does that. But be curious. I haven't done it this time yet. I did it last week. I did it last year. I haven't done it today yet. So be curious. See what happens. Okay, so let's go back to that process we talked about earlier. And we're going to practice reframing. So once again, we're getting started with something, and we're assuming the motivation, the interest, novelty, and the sustained motivation, and then the finish line, right? So let's go further with this. Now, getting started, there is the interest, the motivation, but now we've reframed I need to into one of my favorites, I get to. What's the difference in your mind and in your body when you feel I need to versus I get to? Can you feel that difference? Now, as we said earlier, urgency and deadlines can work for or against us, but we want to reframe some of those things. Like if I don't start today, I'm going to be behind later or something. So we want to reframe. And then, of course, we have the planning and preparation. So what happens is, once we can get to this point, then, Houston, I've reframed these thoughts now. So now I get to. If it's going to be, it's up to me. I'm open to the possibility. I don't know what's going to happen. And a stretch goal. A stretch goal, if you imagine, say, like a donut, and that's the circumference of a donut. Within that is your comfort zone. Now, if somebody tells you to do something, you're not going to just jump out into the universe there for all kinds of possibilities that happen. So a stretch goal is just imagine stretching that circumference just maybe a millimeter, a half inch, and stretch into that and begin comfortable with that. And now you grow into that. Now stretch it again with something else. So stretch goals can help us to warm up to and expand our current experience and alter our experience so that we begin to have a world that's larger, that's more full. Okay, now using that reframe, let's go back here again. Now we have reframed the thoughts and emotions. Now I get to, it's going to be if it's up to me. So now there's no procrastination. There's no need to procrastinate. There's no need to push back. There's no sense avoiding, because instead of I have to or I need to, now I get to. And then there's less need for the procrastivity as well, because we have created something brand new in possibility. So when it comes to getting started, now we have the possibility to bust through and pull that ignition switch that we were unable to reach before because of the preconceived negative thoughts, feelings, and emotions. Okay?
Mhm.
Great. So my question to you then is, what would be possible for you if you could reframe your thoughts, emotions, and limiting beliefs so that you want to do what you're doing or what's next? Okay. Now, I'm going to open to questions at this point.
Can I take this to a slight tangent here? Because there is a discussion going on that I think
Sure.
is very interesting. And
Yeah.
it's about gamifying things, because I do that in my
Yes.
own life. I
Okay.
set myself up and said, let's see if I can do that 1 hour thing in 20 minutes. And I make a game out of it, see if I can finish it quick. But
Yeah.
things like that. Michael's got some good points. Games are somewhat addictive because we get immediate gratification, and we're building towards, you know, rescuing the princess or whatever it happens to be, right, in the old days. So what do you think about that? I mean, it seems that's breaking things down to their little tasks. You got to get through something and then you get rewarded for it. A lot of dopamine going on, I imagine.
Sure, absolutely. That's a good point. Well, maybe it depends how you gamify, because if I say, well, this seems really difficult, but let's create a little game and see what I can do in 15 minutes. Okay, it's just 15 minutes, and that 15 minutes can add up. I know some people, I have some folks that I know that use timers. So they use timers so they can do something, and then next time they want to beat their last time, how long it took them to do that same chore. So there's some kind of games you can play with your mind to do that can work. And you bring up a good point that there can be some games that take you off track and become kind of addictive and distracting. So those are not going to work. So be mindful of the kinds of gamifying you do that can lead to success or just take you off the path.
So 2 more things. I'm just reading through the chat.
Sure.
One of them, really simple. Tracy would like to see the last slide. If you can just back up one, I guess she was writing something. But the question I see here, and I think it's common to most of us, like I said in the beginning, it's not motivation for me. I want to do things. It don't seem to happen. So the question I think is, you know, I like to engage in creativity, but I just can't get myself to do it. So it's genuinely a quote unquote, I want to, but it just doesn't happen. So my example of that, I've been wrestling with this for days now. I want to write a blog, and I genuinely want it done, but I get anxiety around it. That's part of this thing you just went through. And I can do something else with a lot lower anxiety that's also productive, and I don't feel too bad. So and it went through, who was that? Was that Anne? Yeah, she was asking about, she really does want to do it, but slides off to the side for some reason, doing something else.
Yeah. Okay. So Anne, let me ask you some questions. You want to do it. Can you share what it is you want to do?
And that's for you. Actually, Anne, if you don't mind, I'll just open your mic up. Make sure I get the right Anne here. Where are you?
And if not, we can use your example, Rick.
Okay. Nope.
Yeah.
Anne, you're live here if you want to
unmute.
Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes, I can hear you.
So I daydream a lot, and I just want to be able to write down my daydreams. And I did have for a time where I was like, I'll just write 10 minutes every morning. And I did that for a while, and then it getting later in the morning until I just stopped altogether.
Right. Yeah. And so that's one of the risks, the novelty. We love doing those things. And after a while, maybe it loses the spark, or now we're going to do something else before, and it just loses its place. So tell me what you enjoyed about that in writing down your daydreams, your thoughts.
Oh, I like being able to look at them later, and to remember it, because I obviously when you just daydream you forget stuff. So
Sure. Yeah. Right. Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So you enjoyed looking at it later. Okay. What else? When you looked at it later, what came up for you? What thought or feeling? What did you experience?
It's nice, because I'd forgotten some of it. So I'd be like,
Mhm.
oh, cool. Like I didn't remember that part. And, and it was also a relief to know that that part hadn't been forgotten. I was like, oh, that's so good that I wrote that down, because I do it out of order. So sitting here today, I have no idea what is written down because I haven't looked at it
Uh-huh.
in a minute.
Okay. Okay. And so what I'm hearing is that this is something you enjoy doing so that you can look at it again later. And that brings you some satisfaction because, oh, I forgot that. Or, yeah, I did remember that, or something of that sort. So it serves you in some way, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So what more could you do, or in a greater sense, what's the real payoff for you for writing down these daydreams? Is it entertainment, or does it provide something more?
Entertainment and, for myself, and then also kind of, I want to say justification, because I really do spend a lot of time daydreaming. So it feels like wasted time if I
Right.
don't save it. And what ends up happening is I just waste time and it's not saved because I don't remember. Kind of the downside.
Okay. So, Anne, are we talking about procrastivity here? You
Writing it
understand the
down or
question?
daydreaming?
The daydreaming.
I was asking.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. And the writing it down. Yeah.
daydreaming is obviously I do it unbidden. I'm like minding my own business, and next thing I know, 20 minutes later, I've been daydreaming for 20 minutes. So it's
Okay.
definitely the distractibility element for sure.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. We can get carried off into those stories and enjoy the ride. And so what I'm hearing is that you enjoy writing those things down so you can remember what the daydream was. And also, it helps you to remember that you remembered what it was. Okay. Now, if you weren't doing that, how would you be spending your time?
Well, since I'm not writing it down, I'm
Okay.
just doing all this other stuff, right? I'm just not, anything else, work, petting the cat, daydreaming some more. I think I have a theory, but I haven't tested it, that if I write it down, I actually spend less time daydreaming because I've just written it down. I've seen other people say that, but I haven't
Yeah.
tested it myself.
Okay. Okay. So that sounds like a great strategy or tool, that if you write it down, you may not have to go through the full daydream. You've got what you want there. Okay. So what would be possible then for you? What would it look like if you were going to daydream, if that was your choice to daydream, and you could develop a pattern, a routine, a strategy in writing, how to write, when to write those daydreams?
Well, I did, as I said, I did have that where I tried to do it like first thing in the morning for like 10 minutes, and that stopped because I just kept putting it off.
Okay. So we can look at the payoff there, and the cumulative cost of not doing it now is what for you?
Well, certainly, like at this point, years of story potentially all forgotten, which is really depressing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. So there's a couple of issues here that I see. One of them is daydreaming, possibly, rather than doing something else. Okay. And if I were coaching you, I would want to look at that. What's the payoff for that? But the other is, since you're going to daydream, you're going to bring some use to it. So you want to write it down so you can remember, number one, and it's entertainment because you can look at it later. And secondly, when you write that down, it may help to corral the daydreaming so it doesn't go so far. You've written the note. Is that correct?
Yeah, in theory. I
Okay.
haven't tested it.
Oh, okay. Okay. So what would you like to do at this point? If you could reframe all this, if you could create something that's going to work for you that you could feel satisfied with, what would that look like?
I don't know. Can you give me an example?
No, I can't. This is your mind. Yeah. What would it look like if you could create a routine that you could stick with, that you were satisfied with, that served your needs then?
I think it's I'm just not quite understanding the question. I think that's the
Okay.
issue. What do you mean? What would it look like?
Well, if you could imagine that possibility, if you could dream, in fact, daydream this, what would that daydream look like? What would it look like if you could create this into a regular a pattern routine, so you did it to the satisfaction, to the degree you want?
Oh, I would probably have a giant file of all my daydreams.
Okay. Okay. And is that what you're wanting?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. One of the problems here is I'm not real clear what you really want. Is it that you want to daydream, you want to write your daydreams, or you want to limit them so you have the possibility to use that time somewhere else? So I'm not real clear what you really want.
Yeah, I think it's definitely writing it down. That's what I want.
Okay, good. Okay.
Let me,
So what-
let me just, if I
Yeah.
might, because
Sure. Go ahead, Rick.
my girlfriend's interested in something like that. She wants to write a book, and it's a very imaginative kind of fantasy type book, right? And she needs to write a little bit on a very frequent basis of what's in
Right.
her imagination to capture it, because these
Yeah.
ideas, they flow through, and if she doesn't capture them, they're gone. And that might be partly what Anne's talking about.
Mhm.
But it is really hard for her to sit down every day and do 10 minutes worth of writing. I put it in the chat, but I use something called otter.ai. This is not an advertisement, I have nothing to do with them, but it's on your phone, and you can just talk into it, and it won't just digitally record your voice, it will actually transcribe it. And then you can send
Nice.
that to yourself, and you've got the written version of what you said. So it actually works for me. And the free one, it's limited, but it's plenty for what most people want.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Rick, that's great because you can capture it in the moment
Yes.
rather than, well, I'll do that after this, I'll do it here, because you may not capture it that long.
Exactly.
That's a great tool.
If you're out and about, you may not remember what it is by the time you get back to your desk, right? But most people have their phone with them all the time.
Right. How many times have you been driving and came up with some brilliant idea or thought?
Yeah.
But by the time you could stop to write it somewhere, our working memory, it's gone.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
So I don't know, again, if that touches what you were thinking about, because it sounds like that what she's really after is capturing things.
Yeah, I have the same issue because I use Otter all the time when I have like meetings and stuff. And I posted in chat, Google Docs also has speech to text, and it costs nothing. So it's actually a good option. But it's the same issue. I just can't get myself to do it.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on. So yeah.
Can I just say one more thing about habit formation? Because this really worked for me, and probably people who have heard me before have heard me tell this story, but there was a woman in New York City that couldn't remember to take her ADHD medication every day, but every day on the subway, she had a Diet Coke on her way to work. The day she decided to take her medication with that Diet Coke, she never forgot her medication again. So if you've got something that you're trying, a new habit you're trying to install, attach it to something that you already have nailed down. And this idea of do something for 7 days or 30 days or 60, it's nonsense.
Yeah,
but
right.
To capture a habit, you need to embed it into a routine of some sort, like she did. Hey, I'm going to work, I'm drinking my Coke, I'm taking, it's just.
Right. Yeah, Rick, I agree with that. And I deal with that with many clients who forget to take medication. So I ask them, what's something you do first thing in the morning that you always do, like brushing teeth? So you can link the brushing teeth with taking medication, and it's a lot easier. You don't have to store that and think about it, remember it. It becomes an automatic linkage of the two. Mhm.
And if you put the medication next to your toothbrush, all the better.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, that's true.
They've studied people in trying to lose weight, for example. If they just put the junk food in the cabinet where it's out of sight, they lose more weight than the people who leave it out on the counter. And if you're trying to eat better food and you have fruit, you put the fruit in a bowl on the counter where you see it all the time, and you will eat more. So it's really true, out of sight, out of mind. If you want to install a new habit, it has to be top of mind.
Mhm. Okay, good.
Sorry to derail there. Go ahead.
Okay, no, that's fine. That's perfect. So, Ann, are we?
Oh, I
You are
disabled her talking
Okay.
here.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. Rick, how about your blog? Let's talk about that.
My what? My blog?
Yeah.
Oh, it's a fascinating introspection, and I've talked about it in my classes lately because it is something I wrestle with. I really like to write, but when I sit down to start to write, I think this came from high school or something, but I get all kinds of anxiety. Someone's going to read it. Someone's going to judge it. Is it going to be as good as the last thing I did? You know, can I actually reproduce and make something valuable, or am I just, wasting everybody's time? So with that, it's not a huge amount. It's not diagnosable anxiety, but I just don't feel comfortable. And being a little bit hyperactive, I don't feel I'm doing anything unless I'm moving. So I will frequently get up and do something physical, even though I know I want that blog done. And, sooner or later, my team's getting after me. Hey, Rick, you haven't written a blog for over 2 or 3 months. And we're supposed to do one every month.
Right.
Tony knows
Yeah.
what I'm talking about, I guess. But it's just an anxiety. I like to write when I get started. It's just that initial activation that's the problem.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm wondering, Rick, is there something you enjoy doing that you could link to the writing, so that potentially the experience of the writing might feel less anxious?
Probably. What I have linked is, my concept of dinner before dessert. When I think of that other thing I want to do, okay, I can do that after I do my blog, right? So
there you go. Right.
And that actually works for me sometimes, because I am thinking of something I'd rather go do, even if it's just driving and listening to my music, right? I would rather do that. And I say, you know what? And that's when I go to this game thing I mentioned earlier. I list out, like, on my schedule, an hour and a half to do that blog, but then I'll say, let's see if I can get this done in 40 minutes. And so and that helps me too, because I don't know, maybe it's from my high school, college days when I ran on track. I didn't run against anybody else. I ran against my own previous time. So
yes, right.
I will sit down and say, I wonder if I can get this done in 40 minutes.
Right.
So that helps. I don't know what
So
I would tie it to, but
Yeah. What happens when you write the blog and it's out there and people read it and give you feedback? What happens then?
I like that. And I get almost universally good feedback, right? So I'm comfortable with what I write. It's, I had a pretty, like a lot of people with ADHD, I had a really poor time in grammar school and all the way through high school.
Right.
College, and I will say to everybody out there, if you can survive high school, you can do fine. but I do think I carry a lot, decades and decades later, I carry a lot of that with me. And I know that's where the fear or anxiety comes from, because this is going to be looked at, it's going to be judged, etc.
So that's the story that you tell yourself, and that's the story that you've been living with for years. And we all have things like that.
Yes. But
what if you could change the story, change the end, and imagine that, if I don't write this, who am I depriving?
And that's another thing I talk to my team about internally. I don't know where this came from for me, but we didn't do something right not very long ago. And my comment to the team was not to get after them for not doing it right. But I said, somebody somewhere is going to make the decision not to sign up with us because we didn't promote it correctly and we made some mistakes, etc. So it's not that they're in trouble, is that we just let somebody down, right?
Yeah.
So and I think that's what I go to with the blog too. I say to myself, people like it, it's part of what I committed to do.
Exactly.
Not doing it. So it helps me. Yeah.
Okay.
until I end up owing like 6 months worth of them, and then it's overwhelming.
Well, that's the cumulative cost.
Right.
If we put
Exactly.
it off, then yeah, we've got 6 months, not just one blog.
Exactly.
Okay, so it looks like we're gaining towards the top of the hour. Is there anything else, Rick? Any other questions or thoughts or?
I think you've done great. I do have one thing I just want to run by you, because I've been reading about procrastination lately, and it seems to be first a problem of activation, right? And I resonate with that myself. You know,
Sure,
if I can
sure.
get started, I can keep
Right.
going usually. But then the next step, which really resonates with me, is that procrastination is typically mood repair. When I'm being anxious about the blog, and then I go drive and listen to my music, I feel fine, right? I don't
Yeah,
have any
right.
anxiety. Everything, my world is
Right.
good. Of course, I'm numbed out to the fact that I'm being irresponsible, right? But my world is good at that moment. So I get immediately, I feel good about stuff, right? And so,
Right.
do you agree with that? Do you think procrastination is linked to activation, which is linked to mood repair?
Yes, and there's some recent research about this and some books about this, that they're saying that that it's about emotional regulation. That if you look at the emotion and the mood, then tie that in with the procrastination. So what is it? And kind of what we talked about today. What is the feeling? What's the emotion that may be preventing you? Well, I have another idea of procrastination. I read somewhere that, Rick, we are not great weather forecasters, right? And even the weatherman or woman, they can tell you what the weather's going to be like this afternoon, maybe, or tomorrow, but they can't tell you what's going to happen next week. But how often do we tell ourselves, well, you know what? I can't do it. I'll do it next week. We don't know what's going to be in our life then. And when we do that, sometimes, we have not one thing to do, we have three things to do. So, yeah.
Yes. Yep. And yes, Deborah, I did say mood repair. That is what I said.
Right.
No, absolutely. And I know for myself, if I procrastinate on something to the last minute, that might work fine because I'm pretty good at, crisis management, but it won't work fine if something else happens, right? If I've waited to the last minute to, I don't know, turn in a paper or something, and one of my daughters breaks a wrist, well, the wrist is going to take precedent and my paper is not going to get turned in. I actually know somebody that came to me for coaching, and previously she was a perfectionist and she needed to turn something in to get her master's degree. And if she didn't get it turned in on time, she'd have to take a whole nother quarter. So
sure,
she was done 2 weeks early, right? And it was her 90% is better than most people's 100%. She wordsmith. She waited a couple of days and then she only had a couple of days left. Next thing you know, she had 15 minutes left and she went to submit it online and her internet went down and it cost her a quarter. She didn't get her master's at that point.
That's right.
She had to pay a whole bunch more tuition, just a whole cascade of things because she didn't turn it in when she had it done, right? She was perfectionistic about it, which I think is another issue with people.
That's right.
We get perfectionistic and we just can't let it go because for whatever reason.
Yeah. We have this idea, this thought, this illusion of what perfect is. What I tell my clients is that your 120% that you're striving for, 125%, is probably equal to other people's 85%. Yeah. So if you could lower that a little bit, they're probably already happy, but you could expend less time, energy, and anxiety by just shooting for 85%. Your 85% is going to be 100 for other people. So,
I actually tell most of I wouldn't say it to everybody, but I say to most of my coaching clients who are on a perfectionistic side, you got to learn the phrase, it's good enough, right?
Yes,
if it's got a typo in it and someone won't do business with you because of a typo, they're the wrong people anyway. Don't worry about it. Turn it in. If there's a little issue, they'll complain and they'll talk to you and you'll fix it. But you got to learn that phrase, it's good enough, because otherwise you miss out on there's a whole lot of opportunity cost while you're stressing over something for 3 weeks. What else could you have done with all that extra time? And frequently people come to me, they don't come to coaching because everything is perfect, right? They're coming for coaching because things aren't going right. And that's one of the biggest things. They have just gotten stuck and ruminating over and over and over on something. You just have to kind of, it's like a beaver dam, right? You just got to pull the logs out a little bit and let the water flow again.
Yeah. Well, that's what happens. We complicate the simplest thing because it could be better. What if I did this? What if I did that? That's part of that divergent thinking that takes us far away from what the original intention or maybe the goal was. So yeah, we need to learn to, it's good enough. I like that.
One more
I
thing.
use that as well. Sure.
I see the word, I just the corner of my eye, I see the word timer. This, people are tired of hearing it, but I love these timers for
Yes.
one particular reason. They work backwards. They show me the disappearing time. When this red zone starts to get small,
Right.
I
Yeah.
know I got to get done, right?
Right.
The disappearing
Yeah.
time and the visual part of it. You know, I don't have trouble with digital clocks, but when something has to be done, I
Yeah.
love to set that and say, you know what? I said I'd be done
Yeah.
in 40 minutes. Let's just set it for 40
Right.
minutes. It really helps.
Exactly. Time timers are the best. They've got the watches, they've got the big ones, they've got small ones. Yeah. They're great.
Free ones on your phone if you want. So yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Well, Rick.
How do you get others? Oh, how do you get others to buy that? I don't know. That's one thing I've taken onto my own life too. I cannot change what anybody else does. And I see a lot of people that come from coaching that they're complaining about everybody else. Well, they're the common denominator, right? If I want my life to change,
Right.
I have to change
Yeah.
myself. I can't change
Right.
the world. I
Yeah.
can say, you know, these 7 people don't belong in my world anymore. I can certainly say that, but I can't make those 7 people change, right? I
Right.
can shift my
Yeah.
social matrix, but the real changes, if I want my life to change, they have to be within. I have to do them.
Right. So let me share a little something, the 12 steps. The saying, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Well, I've changed it a little bit. So it says, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change in others, the courage to change the things I can in me, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's huge. Almost my entire social matrix changed after I was diagnosed. Very much like an alcoholic going in for rehab, they have to come out to a different world or else they'll go down the same rabbit holes, right?
That's true.
So
That's
I
true.
had to let some people fade out of my life and I had to go out and look for others. And, you know, it's really true. We need to find our community.
We do. We do.
Michael, I guess, says you've been life-changing for him. Yep.
Oh, thank you, Michael. I love that.
Yep.
Yeah.
All righty,
Okay.
guys. Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure. See you again.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Rick.
Bye.
Thanks for the invitation. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.